Welcome back everyone to theCUBE's live coverage here in Barcelona, Spain, here at MWC 2026. I'm John Furrier with Dave Vellante, host of theCUBE, Bob O'Donnell here for the analyst breakdown. We're going to break down the news, put it back together, smash the news. Bob, great to see you.
Thanks,
Even
guys.
my founder, TECHnalysis. Great to have you back on.
No, hey, happy to be here. It's always great to chat with you guys.
See you, man.
And it's fun to be back at the show. I actually skipped last year because I was on a tiger safari in India, but
That's right.
It was time to come back.
You take some great vacations.
Yeah.
So, and usually, a lot of times you come on with Carolina. She was on earlier. She couldn't sync up the schedule. She was awesome.
Yeah.
Carolina was
really
really
talk
amazing.
about Tiger show. This is everyone's got the AI by the tail on this one.
Yeah.
You got AI infusing all pressure on telcos.
Yeah.
Because I think they realize for the first time in their life that they have the world at their fingertips. They have the data, they got the network, they got the users, they're perfectly positioned for sovereign cloud, and 6G is showing great demos. So, and that's going to open up the enterprise and a lot more devices on the network. So, and you got AI factories moving to the edge. We'll hear about that at NVIDIA, GTC in a week and a half.
Yep, exactly.
So, what's your takeaway? What's your assessment?
Well, I mean, look,
of the show?
there's no doubt that one of the big themes from this show is how much people are talking about 6G. Now, to be honest with you, it feels a little early to me, because like we barely got the 5G stuff that we were promised a long time ago. But it's fascinating because what companies are doing is they're bringing together the AI compute on the network with 6G. They're kind of intermingling them. They're like, this is how we're going to make it happen. Now, to be honest, we thought some of that was going to happen with 5G, and I'll talk about one example where we're starting to see a little bit of that. But, companies, Qualcomm has done a tremendous job positioning themselves in this 6G era. They're starting to talk about developing modems eventually that will support the 6G standard. Mind you, they're not even defined yet, but they're putting those pieces in place. AI infrastructure, they're building out, they've got their AI accelerator stuff. They're going to work with Humane in the Middle East on doing some of the AI infrastructure there. Some of that's going to tie to telco as well. You've got companies like Nokia talking about 6G and what they're going to start to enable. Ericsson as well. I mean, it's very interesting to see how a bunch of these companies are starting to say, hey, this is the path we see this going. And because one of the things with 6G that they're also tying it to is physical AI, right? We've all been talking about sort of the general purpose AI, but physical AI, the robotics piece, automotive, what have you. One thing about 6G that seems to be one thing that everybody agrees will be there is what they're calling ISAC, which is integrated sensing and compute or something like that. But bottom line is it's what's called RF sensing. So the idea is that when they're sending out these waveforms back and forth, they can use it as a sort of radar to tell what's in an area. They can map it out, and that's part of the 6G standard. Then theoretically, you take that data back, you can do digital twins, you can do services around automotive, you can do location-based stuff. Yeah. It's a lot of really interesting things, all of which are going to leverage AI. So that's why they're starting to tell this story, I think, to try and tie together 6G and AI. Okay, now, whether it all plays out that way, we'll see.
But it does feel like a classic tech industry, well, 5G never lived up to its promises, so let's talk about 6G. Now, maybe that's different here because the time it takes to actually put all this infrastructure in place. But so where are we on the 5G promise?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I would say we're nowhere near what we thought we were going to be, let's be honest. I mean, and part of the problem was early on we had people saying, oh, we're going to do robotic surgery and all these ridiculous applications that no one in their right mind would ever want. But interestingly, just 2 weeks prior to MWC, T-Mo in the US introduced a service called Live Translate. And it's a translation-based service, which, look, there's plenty of apps that do that, but it does it in the network, voice only. You don't need an app. The other person doesn't need the same app. And in fact, they could have an old BlackBerry or something really old.
Real-time.
Real-time translation.
That's
and
cool.
it's being done in the network. So that shows that you've got some network intelligence going on. That's the kind of stuff that I would argue we were promised. And then at their event they had an event last night, they also showed the ability to check to see if a voice is real. Because nowadays, with phone calls, not only, of course, can we, everybody gets spoofed, they get a call, oh, it's Microsoft support. Yeah, sure it is. But there's even worse examples of that stuff. And now you can get spoofed by calls from friends and family, and then even the voice gets deep faked, and so it becomes a very challenging thing. So now they were showing something, again, it was a demo, that can verify whether or not it's actually the person who they're saying it is. So that's the level of trickery that's going on, and so you've got to have some of these services. So I thought that was actually a pretty cool example of how you can start to integrate some intelligence into the network.
We talked to John Chambers a couple of years ago at RSA, remember about that deep fake?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about 5G is it definitely fell flat on expectations on the monetization. But if you look at 5G from a data perspective, that was the real focus, because 4G had a voice optimized focus. They split it with 5G, so 4G is the backstop for voice. But it really actually delivered good speeds and low latency. So it checked the connectivity box, and the telcos who sell connectivity weren't getting more money for it.
Right.
The prices actually dropped from 4G to 5G. So to me, I'm hearing the same story, which is, okay, if we do AI with 6G and 5G, we have to have the use cases.
Yes.
And what's coming out, I'd love to get your thoughts, is like classic quality of service on the network side and policy-based services. The telcos have to move to a managed platform mindset, and two, think of not the circuit, think of the services.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that? Do you hear that same thing, or am I fantasizing that they're in a state of coherency?
Well, I mean, ultimately that's what they want to try and do, and you're right, I mean, so some people saying, oh, well, 5G didn't live up to its potential, and you could say, well, there are certain elements it didn't, but on the connectivity, quality, speed side, absolutely, right? I mean, we get hundreds of megabits a second in download speeds now from our cellular phones, and ironically, a thing that was just like an afterthought, which is fixed wireless access, FWA, has proven to be a tremendous value, again, for these carriers who are selling connectivity. So that has actually been very positive. The challenge, we have yet to see any really good services that people will pay for. So there hasn't been those additional, like even slicing. Everybody talked about, 5G slicing is going to be so great, and it's a QoS thing, and there's a few examples where maybe you need that and you'll pay for it. Most people are just like, well, I expect the service to be good, so. But what 5G also did was it lowered the cost per bit. So it's much more efficient at delivering more data, which is why we see faster speeds, and yet the service costs haven't gone up. 6G, they're talking about some of that same thing, but really more focused on, hey, we need to create more applications. The problem is, how do you get the business model to change? These telcos are not great at selling these services.
This is the thing, because lower cost per bit has always meant wins for somebody else other than the telcos.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. They're not used to this kind of enterprise selling motion where, for example, NVIDIA last year in DC showed, Kathleen from the healthcare team showed me the AI operating room.
Right.
They got cameras in there, they got computer vision. The hospital should have an AI factory.
Right.
So I think the 5G conversation, the 6G, to me, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is not an incremental shift, it's an architectural shift. Right. So if you take the notion of AI factories, which we know with NVIDIA is what we've been covering, if you take that concept and move it to the edge in a mini factory, small box, DGX box is this big, that could change the architectural framework, and then 6G is running at terabits per second. So imagine these radios highly connected with the factory intelligence, with all this Ethernet multi-access, Wi-Fi 7, 4G, 5G, 6G.
Wi-Fi 8 now.
Wi-Fi 8. I mean, you now have some new stuff.
Here we go.
How do you think about that architecturally? Because that could change the game, or is it too over the top?
To be honest, I think that's a little over the top. It sounds great, John, don't get me wrong.
Okay, it does sound good.
But I think realistically, it's going to be a challenge for them to do that. And it's really interesting to even, I've watched NVIDIA talk about their desire. They have this thing called Aerial, and Aerial is a CUDA-based application for telcos. And the concept is they wanted to convince the telcos and the network equipment providers to put GPUs into their equipment so that they could improve the efficiency of how many bits they could deliver, and then B, do these AI workloads on top of it. And so, but what's interesting is even NVIDIA has kind of evolved their positioning. They realize that the first thing people want to do is do what's called the L1 workloads of the RAN data transfer workloads and sending and receiving of the cellular data with a GPU. It turns out you can do that pretty efficiently, even more efficiently now than you used to, because all the Ericsson, these guys, they had their own custom chips, either FPGAs or custom ASICs to do that. Now, GPUs and these other devices have caught up, and so we're moving to this world of software-defined things. But then, they're also going to sell you, or ideally, they want to have some of their GPUs into the central offices and data center type places, not necessarily on the tower. The tower will be more about just the acceleration of that traffic, the RF traffic. But then those workloads happen potentially in the data center. And so then the question becomes, how do they do this? And look, some of this then plays into sovereign cloud and all this stuff. So for example, Deutsche Telekom, unlike the US carriers, they actually are a hyperscaler for German companies. So they bought a bunch of GPUs, they set up a data center of their own, specifically to do a sovereign cloud type of thing for companies in Germany. US, I talked to John Saw of T-Mo, I'm like, you guys aren't doing that in the US, like, no, we have no, the hyperscalers in the US are perfectly fine.
Doing it, right.
Yeah, we don't need to do this, but it just shows you the regionalization of this stuff as well.
So one of the things I asked Carolina is, when you do that sovereign, I get the benefit of sovereign, do you give up anything? Because the hyperscalers actually have all the AI tooling, they're moving very fast, so what's that trade-off?
I mean, theoretically you would say, well, maybe, are they going to have all the latest versions of some of those services available? I don't know for sure. I don't know that.
They're probably not going to have the breadth and the depth, but or maybe they'll have depth in a certain sector.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the case. That potentially is a bit of a trade-off, but it's just a different way to think about it. And look, all of this ties into a bigger theme that I have been looking at and done some research on, which I call hybrid AI, and that is the fact that ultimately, we're going to do AI, in the cloud. We're going to do AI on the device. We're going to do AI in the network. We're going to do AI in the corporate data center. And splitting up those workloads it's becoming a very interesting question. How do I orchestrate? How do I decide where and how this work is done and who gets paid for doing what portions of the work? All big questions that are still being resolved, but the fundamental thing is we've got compute resources in these different places. Why would we not leverage them? Because if we just do it all in the cloud, then we run into the issue of, can the power grid handle all this? Like, lots of people saying, no, it can't. We got to distribute this.
But Bob, to date, that hybrid has really not been so much of an architecture as, I got to do some stuff in the cloud, I do some stuff on-prem. So, and the stuff on-prem is largely based on sovereign needs.
Yes,
Do those come together as a result of AI?
Yes.
And what does that architecture look like?
Well, and still being determined as we speak, but fundamentally, if you get some level of intelligence, this is where you can have the network guys, the carriers, start to do some of this compute. You're already seeing the enterprise AI factories, Dell, HPE, Lenovo, Cisco, all these guys are selling servers with GPUs for corporations. The research I did showed that a number of companies are actually repatriating AI workloads, not all workloads, but AI workloads from the cloud to on-prem because that's where their data lives. It's classic data gravity.
Repatriate?
I'm a Patriots.
What's the data show? What's your data show?
Fan.
Yeah.
Because it's not that huge of a trend, right? We're talking about like maybe
no,
low double digits.
It's use case driven. It's use case.
What did the data say?
I don't remember the exact
but
number.
it wasn't like 50% of the workloads are moving. But
but again, to be clear, it's only AI workloads, which right now are a small portion of what's being done. Most of the workloads the companies are doing in the cloud are more traditional workloads. Those are not, I'm not talking about that. AI workloads, a lot of them have been little POCs that they're trying stuff, and they're taking those and they're saying, hey, I want to put some of this on-prem. So we're going to see a combination.
So it's not so much repatriation as it is, we did our test at dev in the cloud, and we're not going to run production in the cloud, we're going to do that on-prem.
But
that makes sense.
Yes, exactly. And
I want to throw this out to you guys because I want to come back to earth a little bit, up the high, low, a little over the top, but let's connect some dots. I'll throw a puzzle out there, a little test. If you look at the architectural shift with NVIDIA, look at the embedded systems and the development. Saw some demos here at this show. Jetson's doing 2,000 petaflops. And if you look at physical AI and robotics, what Jensen's doing, those devices need connectivity.
Yes.
Now they're distributed computing, call it factory models, whatever.
Yep.
So if you got a self-driving car, Waymo, it's got to drive, it needs connectivity. If it loses connectivity, it can still drive and shut off some subsystems.
Right.
They have memory swapping going on, so you have a lot of power in the devices, the physical plant or tower or whatever. So the question is physical AI, robotics, a tell sign for edge? Because you could argue that it has its own memory, and the Jetson products doing all the petaflops, it's got compute on the actual robot. So,
of course.
Okay, so that's just a memory problem, that gets fixed over time, but is that the model we should look at for thinking through AI at the edge? Because that is where the action is for NVIDIA.
No, for sure, but I think it's a combination, John. I think what we're going to see is there are certain environments where, if it's a robot working in a warehouse or a factory, right, it's going to leverage, Wi-Fi more than likely, but it's still going to have its own onboard compute to be able to function on its own. And then in other environments where, you need different types of connectivity, it's going to be different solutions. The other thing is...
Like wireless.
Yeah, I mean, various forms of wireless, but likely cellular. And so I think we're going to see some opportunities there. So, look, the diversity of workloads we're going to see, the diversity of AI applications is going to be enormous. And so all of these things can happen.
That's the key point, the diversity of workloads.
It doesn't mean it's not one versus the other.
I was just in the Wind River booth talking to those guys, and they have this car there, and I go, tell me about this. And they're owned by Aptiv. They bought Aptiv hardware. They used to be Delphi. They bought Wind River years ago. Okay, what Wind River does, software company, because there's no standards across the automakers in terms of how the cars are going to communicate with each other, these autonomous vehicles. And there's a concept called Byzantine fault tolerance. Byzantine fault tolerance in military terms is when the general says, the general says this is what we're going to do, and then you get into the fog of war, and then the armies are like, well, what are we doing now? Because everything changed. They can't communicate. Well, that's a problem for autonomous vehicles. Well, what they were describing is essentially what I call Byzantine fault tolerance, where you can actually sense a pedestrian even though it might not be in sight of the LiDAR. And so they could slow down, or same thing, so they can see around corners essentially.
Right.
So that kind of use case is really fascinating to me. Now, I don't know who's going to pay for that. Is it the consumer? Is it the automaker?
Again, the AI business model problem is a huge issue. I was talking about the telcos trying to figure out how they can become more than just a dumb pipe and charging for services and people actually being willing to pay. That's, we got to figure that out. There's a lot of places where this has to be figured out. I mean, all the AI bubble we've all been talking about forever, whatever your perspective on it, is all based on the concern that, hey, if everybody's using this stuff for free, ultimately somebody's got to pay for all that compute infrastructure.
Well, that language translation example you gave says it's more than a dumb pipe. It's actually got some intelligence in the network.
But that's literally like one of the first examples.
There's one.
But, and the question is, initially they're going to make it for free, and they haven't clarified what the business model is going to be. Right now it's a technology demonstration, and then will they actually start to charge for it? That becomes, one of the big questions. And, I think for certain people that would be something they charge for, or it's one of these things where if you buy all you can eat plans, they throw it in for free, right? That's the logical way for them to do it.
I think you, Bob, you nailed the earlier comment about hybrid cloud, because I think hybrid cloud and AI in telecom is here.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. You agree with that. Autonomous stuff starts to happen. We heard Red Hat and even IBM talking about automation.
Yep.
They're a little bit more of an IBM side view of it, but that translates to use cases in telecom, how to get subscribers back, how to get the data active.
Yeah.
I got to change topics and ask you about what's happening in the markets.
Sure.
Because you're seeing a couple of things going on. You see the SaaSpocalypse, I don't know if you ever thought of there. I was fascinated by NVIDIA's quarter, their earnings print, which they blew it out, and the stock drops the next day. And then you compare that to Dell, who announced a day later, who also blew it out. They're essentially tied at the hip to NVIDIA, and their stock went up 20%.
Right.
It seems like the market's really confused.
Well, obviously,
cut through the noise.
So it's obviously very confused, and the issue is NVIDIA has become this, North Star for like all of tech, like it or not, right? It is the one thing, and because NVIDIA is basically driving a lot of these deals on its own, there is that concern of, the house of cards, could it start to crumble if OpenAI can't really deliver. I mean,
the blast radius is a problem.
Exactly. I mean, so how many of these things can tumble? I mean, I give them a lot of credit. They're everywhere. They have even though they don't have a physical booth here, the presence of NVIDIA here is enormous. At CES, everywhere. Their presence is being felt everywhere. Now, they're also sucking the value out of everybody else's stuff, unfortunately, and hey, good for them, but it's become so dependent upon them, and so there's an over-obsession on this. The other thing is, when you become that big, a lot of it is just momentum in the market. It has nothing to do with actual fundamentals or anything. It's just like, following the herd, baby. I'm going to follow the herd.
Okay, but so Dell was obviously earnings momentum, revenue growth, and capital back to the shareholders.
Yeah,
No, shareholders love that, but it was just because you're right. I mean, if it's a house of cards, Dell's going to go down with it.
Well, but Dell isn't tied like everybody. Dell's got plenty of other business that's not uniquely tied. I mean, and they do a lot.
Sure, but whatever, 39% revenue growth is a function of AI servers. Right?
Absolutely, no.
It wasn't storage driving that growth or PCs.
Right, but people don't see any of the other individual companies as having the same,
exposure
that.
But in fact, they do.
They kind of do.
Because of what you described before, because they're embedded into the ecosystem.
But the other thing to bear in mind, again, when you get to this level of influence on the market, it's not about logic. I used to think that all the stock market moves were logic-based. Got news for you, buddy.
Well, you're right, it's news-based, momentum-based.
It's especially when you're that
But
big.
oftentimes some things that people can't see. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not right.
No, that's fair. I mean, that's perfect.
What about the SaaSpocalypse? I don't know, do you cover that?
I have an opinion. I mean, I do think we are going to see some developments that impact how much people use some of these tools. But here's the biggest thing to remember, and this came up some research I did last year. People who are using AI tools in these organizations are not being properly trained. And so people don't really know how to use them. And so, one of the biggest challenges and how to integrate them into their day-to-day workflow. That's a huge problem right now. So let's just say that some AI tool is the most amazing thing ever created. The amount of time it's going to take to integrate that into an existing company's
OpenClaw,
systems,
for example.
But the amount of time it's going to, but OpenClaw is kind of a
but it's complicated. Fine, co-work, Claude co-work. Here you go.
But and that's for a very specialized group of people. When you're talking about a broad, like, hey, everybody at GM is going to be trained on these new AI tools, and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we're going to integrate it into our systems. Those types of processes take years. That's not a technology issue, that's a people issue.
Well, wasn't that what Copilot was supposed to be? This magic that just gets embedded into my productivity software?
And we obviously haven't exactly seen
$30 per user per month, it's like, no, I don't think so.
But the point is, I think the challenge is that I do think we'll see some of these software companies have a bit of a hard time because some of the functionality that they offer can be easily duplicated. But again, a big part of some of what these folks do is embedded into the entire process of how people do the work, and people don't change habits that easily.
So that would say that a Salesforce or a ServiceNow or even a Workday is insulated.
I'm not saying they're completely insulated, but I don't think they're going to be destroyed.
But one could do the discounted cash flow and argue that the future values and the valuation shouldn't be as high, but it would also say to me potentially that in single user productivity software, where the file formats are all open and Claude Cowork can go read them, sort of disintermediates the need to make PowerPoint, Excel, and Word your actual work surface.
It could be, but again, at the end of the day, what am I going to send you? Like, hey Dave, I got this new report I just did, here's the PowerPoint. Like,
yeah, but the agent is going to use the PowerPoint tool, not the end user. The end user is going to interact with some new, like Claude Cowork, and to talk to it. And so, what does that do to the value proposition of those tools?
Again, it is going to change it, and it's going to reduce it. I'm not denying that at all.
Microsoft will let that happen?
I don't know. I mean, are they going to?
Well, but their assumption was we're going to embed Copilot into these tools.
Right, exactly.
And that doesn't seem to be, that dog doesn't hunt right now.
And it doesn't hunt
Thanks
yet,
to Cowork.
But again, let's also remember, we're early days. like this stuff is going to get way better.
It's a sign though, isn't it?
It is a sign, but look, we still have the problem that right now, to really use all this stuff, you have to be a prompt engineer, right? Like if you literally change a few words into any of these things that you type into, whether it's just a chat prompt or even some of these agentic tools, you get dramatically different levels of quality in terms of the of getting it back. That's why the training issue is so, and there's no, a lot of these, the tools themselves don't have built-in help, and they don't have, ironically, they're not using AI to help you learn how to use the AI tool.
So I guess to that scenario, if, and I'm kind of taking a poke at Microsoft's $30 per user per month, but let's assume that Copilot gets really good, like Glean. Glean is kind of what Copilot should have been. In theory, they could give it away,
right,
and that people would be loyal to it, which is kind of what a Microsoft tactic, which has worked time and time again. Maybe it works this time, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, all fair questions, and there's no question our work habits are going to change, but nobody changes overnight. Like, we've all been using these tools, but have you completely stopped using your other productivity tools?
No, but I've spent less time on them.
Yeah, agreed. But it's going to be a long time probably before you completely stop using them, and for a lot of people, I think it's a similar situation.
And I'm fickle. I mean, love ChatGPT, Gemini, looking pretty good these days.
Yeah,
so
and that's
sucking up more of my time.
Exactly, and
I use Grok for certain use cases.
Google's got a bigger context window.
Yes,
it does.
I've gone back and
it's
forth
got
on
much
those
better
things.
images.
But anyway, the point is, I think there's a lot of structural and procedural human-based issues that are way bigger than most people are giving them credit for. Not to mention the fact that, let's not forget, you got a whole bunch of people who are going, you know what, I'm not sure I want to use this AI tool because I'm afraid it's going to, screw with my job. Like, so there's all kinds of factors.
It's early days.
Yeah, but at the same time, it is early days, but it's starting to get beyond the first inning, guys, right?
I mean, fair.
We're well into almost the middle.
2 outs in the top of the first.
I'd say we're to the third. I think it started in 2017, but okay, nonetheless, you can't be a Luddite. You can't not.
For sure.
All right, the first top of the inning was generative AI. Bottom of the first is agents.
No, the first inning was DeepMind. That was the first inning when nobody was paying attention.
That was spring training.
Maybe, okay.
All right, Bob,
and
final
transformer
question.
models,
Bob,
diffusion models.
Thanks for coming on. You guys are great to chat with. Love riffing in real time. Final question, what are you working on now? What research are you looking at? What's got your interest?
Yeah, I mean, I published a study a couple of months ago on hybrid AI that I was talking about, and this whole notion of distributed computing. My next study is going to be on agentic AI, because that's what everybody's talking about. It's a drinking game, like now everybody's got a drink, because I said it. I just think how these worlds start to come together is what's really fascinating. I mean, one of the things that I pride myself on is looking at everything from the semiconductors through the devices to the cloud to the applications, and how does this stuff actually fit together? And those are the stories I'm working on trying to tell across the board. Yeah. And it's a great time to be an analyst, man, because everybody's trying to figure that out. And so...
Yeah, there's a lot of building
chaos and confusion are great for your business.
Absolutely.
All right, we're doing our part to clear up the confusion, bring the signal, not the noise. Of course, this is theCUBE's main purpose. I'm John Furrier, Dave Vellante, Bob O'Donnell here at MWC, breaking it down, putting it all back together. We'll be right back with more after this short break.